What's happening, guys? Scott Bancroft here. Welcome back to another video. Hope you had an excellent weekend with family and friends, and I hope you did get some time to take some photos. Last video we went through why you should never delete photos straight from your camera, and today I'll be telling you how to sharpen those photos to make them look quite professional. The viewer's eye is drawn to the sharpest part of the photo. That's why it's so important to get your subject nice and sharp and in focus. I'm not going to go into the theory behind sharpening and what causes it to be sharp. I'm going to give you the practical application so you can go straight to your photos after this and start editing them like a pro. So let's dive on into Lightroom now and load up a couple of images that I took. The photo that we've just loaded up into Lightroom now is taken on top of Felons Brewery, looking towards East Brisbane on the other side of the river. I'm not going to bore you with the complete edit of this photo, but I'll tell you what I did just so you have an idea of where this photo's come from. I boosted the exposure, I brought the highlights down so the building and street lights were not too blown out and in focus, I've pushed the shadows up, and I've added a bit of clarity and dehaze because there was a bit of smog in the air. I always boost the vibrance, like I said in the last video, to something around +5. That way I've got a good color correcting panel to start with if I do take it into Photoshop. And now we find ourselves in the detail panel where we'll be talking about sharpening as well as noise reduction. I really want to draw the viewer's eye to the skyline in the back as well as the walkway on the left hand side. I'm going to show you a couple of tips how I can do that just using some basic Lightroom functions that are on the mobile app as well as on a desktop. The first thing we want to do when we're going to be sharpening or reducing noise in an image, we want to blow it up to 1:1 scale. So in the top left hand part in the navigator panel, you click 1:1 and that's going to show you its exact size of what it's going to be printed at its current resolution. If you do zoom in too much into the photo, you're going to start seeing grain and noise that probably won't even be there when you print it. So by setting it as 1:1 scale, you're going to see the exact size of the image. I'm going to actually zoom in more than what I suggested just so I can show you how the computer generates sharpening. It creates sharpening by creating a small little white halo around discernible edges, and it's going to create that contrast to create a sharpening effect. So I've just zoomed in onto this building 8 times, and you can see that it does look quite pixelated because it's 8 times its actual size. But if I bring that sharpening all the way up, you're going to start seeing that white glow around the discernible edges. I'm going to toggle it on and toggle it off, and you can see that white glow especially around these vertical lines in that top balcony area. If we zoom out back to 1:1 scale, the photo does look quite sharp, but be careful of using all the sharpening. You want to use it subtly but effectively. So usually I'll limit my sharpening to around 50 or 60 if I'm only using Lightroom. I have a separate sharpening way that I use when I'm using Photoshop. So we've discussed about the amount of sharpening we use, and we're not going to use too much because then it's going to start looking harsh and really fake, but you also don't want to use too little that the effect's not there. So we can use the radius slider now, which is going into the depths of Lightroom sharpening. And simply, the radius is how many pixels that glow is going to create. Let's zoom back in and let's boost that sharpening all the way up so it's easy to see. And now we're going to slide the radius slider all the way up, and it will max out at 3.0, which is 3 pixels large. And what you think by boosting that slide is going to help your photo, it actually starts detracting away from it because it's now covering up some of that quality that was there. When using Lightroom, I generally keep the radius slider where it is at 0.5, which is the far left-hand side of the slider, but no more than 1 or 1.5 pixels, otherwise it does start taking away from your photos. The next slider down is the detail slider, and that's going to tell the computer how much sharpening you want to preserve detail. And what it's doing is it will create contrast around the tiniest details based on how far you push that slider to the right. Again, I don't use this slider all that much because I find that it does detract away from the natural sharpness of my camera. But for the purpose of the exercise, let's push that slider all the way to the right and let's see what the detail slider really does. So you can see that we've pushed the detail slider all the way to the right, and it's actually induced a lot of pixelation into the photo. Let's zoom out to something like 3:1, which is 3 times its normal size, in case if you wanted to blow your print up a little bit, and you can see the pixelation is still there. Be careful on just boosting sliders for the sake of it. It's a subtle but powerful effect. So I've just reset the sliders now to something that I want, which is 50 on the amount, a radius of 0.5, and no detail enhancing. The last slider in the sharpening panel is masking, and that's going to allow you to apply those sharpening effects to selected areas. So let's press and hold Option and push that masking slider to the right. And you can see that white and black areas are forming over your photo. Anything that is white will be visible, and I'm pushing it enough to the right to ensure the sky is completely black and only the edges of the buildings and lines are visible in white. And letting go of Option in your mouse, those sharpening effects are only applied to the buildings. And to show you, we're going to zoom in all the way again. And you can see here there's just subtle sharpening within the photo. The aim isn't to make the entire image sharp, that's why we're selectively applying it just to the buildings and the walkway areas. If we zoom out so you can see the photo and I press Option and hold the masking slider again, you can see exactly where throughout the entire image that sharpening will be applied. And with the masking, if you're using the mobile version, you're not going to have the opportunity to press Option and see where it's being applied. So 3 general settings that I'll use for masking is 30 for general masking, 60 for a couple more details, and up to 90 if you want just sharp details such as building lines and walkways and light posts. And now with that done, we can move on into the noise reduction section. There is no denying it, the better your camera, the better the sensor, the less grain you're going to get when shooting in low light. But this is especially important if you are taking those nighttime iPhone photos and you want to get rid of some of that noisy grain. The luminance slider is going to take away any unwanted light noise within your photo, which is caused by having that higher ISO setting. So to reduce it, we're going to push that slider all the way to the right until that noise becomes less distracting. The goal is not to remove all the noise, we're just trying to remove it so it's not distracting. The more noise reduction you put into a photo, you're going to be chipping away at the sharpening that we've just put in. So it's a bit of a balancing act. We're trying to make the image sharp, but also look as noise free as possible. But without a doubt, you will get grainy images, especially shooting on a phone. So this tip is going to help you improve those photos so they look a little bit better. The detail slider deals with the protection of detail when applying noise reduction. As I said, when you apply noise reduction, you do chip away at the sharpness. So boosting that detail will try to reinstate that sharpness into the image. But with every edit you make, it does chip away at the quality of the photo. So I generally leave the detail slider where it is by default, which is 50, and the contrast at 0. And the same goes with the color section. The color slider removes any color noise in the photo, and that's all those multicolored pixels you might see in some of the areas. And that's about it for the sharpening. We've gone through how to apply the sharpening, how much you should apply, the masking of it, as well as the noise reduction. Another little Photoshop thing that I like to do with some of my photos, especially if I've been sitting there for a while and I've got the same composition both in day and night, I like to turn on a couple more city lights. I won't go into a massive tutorial about it now. I want to wrap this video up, but I'll show you quickly what I do. I'm going to load this image up here into Photoshop, and then I'm going to load this nighttime version of it up in Photoshop, and it's got a couple more city lights. Now this is not going to make or break your photo, but this is something fun I like to do and a little bit creative. I take the dark photo, I press Ctrl A to select it all, Ctrl C to make a copy, Ctrl W to close it. It's all these little hotkeys that you'll learn once you start playing around with Photoshop a lot. It makes it so much quicker. And then Ctrl V to paste on top of the other one. So now we have 2 images. We've got the dark photo overlaying the dusk photo. What I'm going to do is in the bottom right hand side in the layers section of Photoshop, which is a whole separate tutorial on its own, and if you really want to see how this is done properly, comment below, send me a message, I'd love to do it. And I'm just going to press lighten. Essentially all that I'm doing is putting a blending mode on that tells the computer or Photoshop any pixel that's the brightest, display that one. That way you're not overlapping on lights that are already there, and it only puts the brightest pixels into that photo. You zoom in onto that river line and you can see some of those ground lights showing up. Toggle that on and off just so you can have a look. There we go, and you can see some more of those building lights turning on. It's a really powerful effect when you've got a golden hour photo with no city lights and a dark photo with a lot of city lights, and you blend them together and it creates a spectacular image. So I'm going to apply now a black mask on top of that layer to hide everything. I'm just going to press B for the brush tool. Using a white color, I'm just going to brush in those city lights where I want them. That way you're not going to get too completely overexposed. City lights, especially these ones down here in the bottom left, where you have that entrance area, they can become quite bright if you overlay them. And even some of these on the walkway here. So that's looking quite nice now. Quick little edit, I'm gonna press File, Save, and that's gonna bring it back into Lightroom with those edits applied to it. And that's really the nice thing about Lightroom and Photoshop being in sync and editing within each other. Any edits you do on one program will convert to the other program. And there we go. We've got our photo with those extra city lights loaded up back into Lightroom. You'll see that no edits are applied to it because it's created a separate image. That way you're not constantly baking on top of each other. You've just got a separate image with those Photoshop adjustments. And with this new image, I'm going to go down to the effects panel and just apply a little vignette to it, and I'll show you how it really draws your eye into where I want it to go. And there we go, I'm going to bring that vignette slider to the left, then I'm just going to adjust its feather to make it a little bit softer so it doesn't look like you're looking through a dark window. And with that, the eye gets drawn to the brightest as well as the sharpest part of the photo. And then once you've identified where I want you to look, which is the buildings and the walkway, then your eyes can wander around the photo looking for extra little bits of detail that are quite cool. And that's about it for today. We went through the sharpening, noise reduction, and how to draw attention to specific areas. If you liked today's video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.